In this video, we will talk about working with primary keys. In an earlier lesson, you learned that a primary key is a column that uniquely identifies a record or row in a table. And it needs to be something that is unique, that would only be good for that one record. Something like a customer ID number or a serial number or a product ID would all make good primary keys. And each table should have a primary key. Some tables might even have more than one primary key. When you divide information into separate tables, the primary keys can help Access bring that information back together again. And you can define a primary key for a field in Design View, and we will take a look at how you can do that in just a moment. You also need to know that when you create a new database, Access will create a primary key field named ID that is set to auto number by default, and you can always go in and change that as you need to. And if you don't have a field in your table that you think will make a good primary key, you can always use a field that does use that auto number type, just like Access does by default. Your primary key might not contain factual information about a record, and it's not likely to change. Once you define a primary key, you can use it in other tables to refer back to that table. And when you do that, that would be called the foreign key. And the foreign key is used to reference the data from the primary key, and that's one way that we help avoid redundancy in databases. You can always modify a primary key by deleting it from one field and adding it to another field. And we'll look at how to do that in Design View. So I am going to be using the same database that we have used previously, the fourth copy one, and this time I'm going to pull up the order summary table. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my view from Datasheet View over to Design View. And doing this allows me to see if a primary key is set, and if so, which field is used as the primary key. In this case, you can see that there is no primary key set because there's no little key icon beside any of my fields. To designate one of my fields as the primary key, I simply need to click the row selector box beside the row that I want to use, and in this case I'm going to use the order ID, and then I can simply select on the Table Tools Design tab the primary key button. And when I do that, now you can see that order ID is designated as the primary key for this table. One thing that you will notice now that the primary key is set to order ID, if I look at my field properties, then this is changed to yes, it is a required field. Whereas if I deselect order ID as the primary key, it is no longer a required field. So whatever you select as your primary key will become a required field. There might be times when you need to modify or define a multi-field primary key. And this means that you would use two or more fields that together provide the primary key of a table. So to do that, also in Design View, which is where I am, you would select the rows you want to designate as primary keys and click the primary key button, just as we did before. So to select two or more rows, you simply need to hold down the Control key on your keyboard, and that will allow you to select multiple rows, as you can see here. And now I can click primary key, and now both paid and order ID are selected as my multi-field primary keys. And when we have two or more primary keys in a table, they are now called the composite key. And they're useful sometimes when we need a combination of data to provide unique identifiers. For example, an area code field along with a phone number field might be combined together. Separately, those aren't that useful, but together they do give us the whole picture.